Well, Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri says the government won't introduce any new taxes on individuals and has promised to halve the salaries of ministers and lawmakers. It's part of a reform package and budget for 2020, drawn up in response to anti-government protests that have gripped the country over the past few days. Hariri's economic plan includes a budget deficit of 0.6% of GDP for next year, down from the previous target of 7%. He's also promising more aid to poorer families. Tens of thousands of protesters have been demonstrating since Friday after the government introduced a tax of 20 US cents on calls made via WhatsApp and other messaging services. The tax has since been revoked, but people are still angry over weakening economic conditions and corruption and have called for the government to step down.
These decisions are not for bartering. They're not to ask you to stop protesting or expressing anger. This is something that you decide, and we're not going to give you a deadline and will not allow anyone to threaten or intimidate you. You have to know your voice is being heard, and if early elections is something that you want in order to make sure that your voice is being heard, then I, Saad Hariri, will personally support you on this.
And TRT World's Adam Pletz has been following developments in Lebanon. He joins us now from Beirut. Hi, Adam. Now, Lebanese Prime Minister's new package is essentially designed to get the protesters off the street and really avoid a financial meltdown for the country. Tell us more about what is announced.
Right, it was interesting the way that the Prime Minister himself has sold this. And Hariri, on the one hand, he says he's with the calls of the demonstrators, that he understands why they're out here on the streets, and that these measures that he's announced today aren't simply to end the protests. And he's even tried to portray it, many people here think, that as if the protesters themselves have empowered him to be able to push these reforms through. But frankly, most of the people we've spoken to, and there's still many thousands out protesting tonight after this announcement, they are skeptical about his claim that this wasn't simply to assuage their anger. And when you look at some of the measures that he's put into place, you can see why. I mean, these really do look as if they're just about sort of dissipating some of the anger here. Firstly, the halving of ministerial salaries, and then plans to put licensing of power plants, or to speed that up, to solve the electricity provision problem here. And on top of that, a draft law that would try to tackle corruption here. And these are all things that we've heard people talking about in the demonstrations over and over again. So they're skeptical that this, especially since it was put together in 72 hours, isn't just about trying to assuage the anger here.
Yes, now protesters have been gathering for a fifth day now. I can see some of them in the background there. How have they reacted to the announcement?
It's not enough for them. I mean, for them, this is too little, too late. And the reforms that were announced today, they're only economic reforms. And really, we've been hearing that there are two sets of grievances here. On the one hand, about the economy. There's been a financial crisis here for some time. The economy is nosediving. But on the other hand, certainly the people who are out on these demonstrations, they're angry with the political system itself. I mean, they call for resignations across the board. They're looking for an overhaul of the political system itself, rather than policy reforms, and that's simply not enough for them.
Okay, now this revolt, as we know, is remarkable in that it really has cut across sectarian and political lines. Remind us how they all began.
Well, of all things, this was about a tax that was to be put on VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, which is the technology used in applications like WhatsApp. So to start with, this was dubbed the WhatsApp revolution. But clearly it's not because people are, and they were, but it's just the final straw. It's not because they're angry about paying an extra 20 cents a day to use WhatsApp. It's because the economy has been in a terrible state. The lira, the local currency, the Lebanese lira, is supposed to be pegged to the dollar. On the street, its value has been slipping. It's made it difficult for businesses. It's made it difficult for some people like wheat traders. The government actually had to step in, and guarantee the exchange rates for some groups of traders to make sure that those basic necessities and commodities would be available on the streets. So this is the worst financial crisis that Lebanon's seen for a while. And as you said, it's cross-sectarian lines. I think that's what's really different here. But we have to bear in mind that even if the people who are coming out on these demonstrations have come out with one voice, and we've only seen Lebanese flags here, we haven't seen the usual array of party political affiliations and flags from all kinds of different groups. But at the same time, there are an awful lot of people here in Lebanon who are still very invested in the sectarian political system here.
Okay, Adam Pletz, thanks so much for keeping us up to date from Beirut.